Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Beauvais on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am every week. Deborah Beauvais, founder and owner of the Dream Vision 7 radio network. And if you're tuning in for the first time, we are a Boston-based syndicated internet radio station with all the bells and whistles in technology where you can listen wherever you are, whether it's in a car, whether you're in a different country, or wherever you can listen to us. And we are proud to be the media partner for the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. There is still time to attend person-to-person workshops there until October 31st, as well as online. And you'll hear some of the ones that we are offering because of our media partnership, that you can receive 20% off. Okay, so we have an excellent guest for you. Actually, he was on Dr. Bernie's show, and you can go on our site, which is Dream Visions, all one word with an S on the end, the number 7, radio.com, and just look for Bernie, and you can listen to Dr. Harley Rotbart, who is my guest, and he has written 6 books, and the book we're going to be talking about is No Regrets Living, 7 Keys to a Life of Wonder and Contentment. Now, Dr. Rotbart is a nationally renowned infectious disease specialist. He's also a pediatrician, a parenting expert, speaker and educator. He is a professor. He has written many articles, and he's quite well known. And if you want to get in touch with him, you can go on his site. It's harleyrotbart.com. Harley is Harley. Rotbart is ROTBART.com. So welcome to the show, Dr. Harley.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, and I really get to, feel your wisdom and knowledge when you were on Bernie's show, and just felt that we needed to connect with you again.
Good. I'm glad to have a chance. Yep.
Yes. So what I find fascinating is when you open up the book, you start talking and discussing your thoughts and perceptions around the beginning of life, the Big Bang. And so I wanted to talk with you about that because some people, I find it fascinating. We all come from the same source, and yet we all have our different perspectives and thoughts depending on the way they've been brought up generations ago, and at the same time, we can form opinions or thoughts based as we go through our journey of life, and they're never the same. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on that, and what your perception, and possibly can the Big Bang and the creation by God, a higher being, could they balance together?
Well, the short answer to that is, of course. The longer answer is a little bit more complicated. The first of the 7 keys that I write about in No Regrets Living is called believe. And I am not presumptuous enough to tell anyone what they should believe. I'm not a holy roller. I'm not a preacher. I'm really a scientist, a clinician, evidence-based scientist, but I'm also a person of faith. And I have been able to reconcile the two, both as a scientist and as a person of faith. And the way that I reconcile those is to realize the impossibility of the Big Bang, which I believe in. I believe the Big Bang occurred. I believe that the scientific evidence, and I'm a scientist, I believe that the evidence supports the concept of a Big Bang.
Well, the energies are, we're talking about the Big Bang and God, so I can understand why.
Right.
Whatever's coming through.
That may have been divine intervention that cut me off. I can't tell for sure, but maybe I was saying something that offended someone. So what I was saying was that I believe the evidence for the Big Bang, and as a scientist, I am evidence-based, and right now, the evidence does support the theory that at one point, 13.8 billion years ago, everything that we know and everything that we don't know, the entire universe, every molecule in us, every molecule in every species, every piece of ground and every ounce of tree was concentrated into what is called a singularity, which is so infinitesimally small that it can't be pictured, and yet all the energy was in there, and then for reasons that no one will ever be able to explain, that singularity exploded with a power greater than anything ever in the universe, and it caused the expansion of what we now know as the universe, the creation of all species, and every atom and molecule that exists. That's the theory of the Big Bang. There is evidence to support that. But intuitively, I think everyone has to say, you're kidding. Really? That's what happened? There was this infinitesimally small singularity and everything exploded? Yes, right now that's what the evidence suggests. So how can we explain that? Let me pause there for a moment. And now let me focus on God, on the concept of a divine creation. According to the Bible, a divine creation occurred over a period of 7 days. And during that period of 7 days, everything that was and everything that will be was created. And evolution then took hold, and the species that were created, including man, evolved and became what we know today. Now, how is that possible? It's identically impossible in my mind to believe that everything happened in a period of 7 days, even if we use the explanation that, the term day didn't mean what it does now. It's still, I consider both the concept of divine creation and the concept of the Big Bang equally impossible to believe, and I believe both of them. I believe both of them. I have the scientific background to understand the physics that tries to explain the Big Bang, and I have the religious background to try and understand the faith that explains a divine creation. And I believe in both. And I think all of your listeners can understand that with a little bit of imagination, one can see the Big Bang and the story of creation as the same thing. That all of a sudden there was stuff that hadn't been there before. And so, yes, I think that we can reconcile religion, with science, and I believe in both.
Right. And I believe with science and spirituality that they can live together. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There's a balance there. Everything has a balance. But I find it's fun to talk about and to ask questions and to think about the possibilities of everything, and even when you're experiencing different phenomenons, you just know from a personal experience that there is a higher guidance, a higher being, whatever you want to call it. We're just not going, we're not buying shoes and going to the grocery store. That's not why we came here. But do you ever, I'm sure you do, Dr. Harley, but do you ever wonder why? What is this really all about from a higher perspective?
Of course. And Deborah, let me share with you a metaphor that I have used to try and explain all of this to my kids as they were growing up. How do we, what is our purpose? How do we know that there was a bang? How do we know that there was a creation? How is it possible that, for example, a hummingbird can flap its wings 80 times per second? 80 times per second. Can we make a hummingbird? How can we explain that a virus that began somewhere in China literally shut down the entire world? I can't. I'm a virologist. I've been a virologist for 40 years. I can't make a virus. No one has made a virus. Viruses are there. How do we explain that? And what I've tried to teach my kids is a concept that I call the miraculous event. And so picture, kids, a two-dimensional world where there's only length and width. There's no up or down. It's like a sheet of paper, but not even with the thickness of a sheet of paper. And onto that two-dimensional world, suddenly a dot appears. Now, two-dimensional beings, and they're all geometric shapes. They're circles and triangles, and over the generations, the circles and triangles have mated, and there are various shapes. But they all start out as baby dots. Every geometric form on this two-dimensional planet starts out as a baby dot. So suddenly a dot appears out of nowhere. Now it's in the middle of town square, and it's rush hour, and nobody really notices the dot. If they would have thought, strange that there isn't a dot sitter, a babysitter with this dot pushing the dot along, or there isn't a parent figure. But there wasn't. But the remarkable thing is suddenly this dot, which appeared out of nowhere, began to grow. And it became a small circle, and then a bigger circle, and then a very big circle that threatened to displace the entire town center. And all of the other geometric shapes were shoved aside as this giant circle seemed to take over. And then just as fast as it came, it began shrinking and finally disappeared as a dot, and then disappeared completely. Now, what was that? No one on the two-dimensional planet could explain it. They came up with theories. They called it the theory of the great dot, the theory of the disappearance, the theory of the appearance. There were religious institutions that were built around town center to worship the dot. And there were scientists who developed an entire field of dotology to try and explain what happened, but no one could explain. The military was geared up to protect against an invasion. Could this have been an invasion? But what they could never understand, because they lived in a two-dimensional world, is that what happened is a sphere, a ball, had touched down on the planet. When it first touched down on this two-dimensional planet, it was a dot. And as it passed through the planet, it got to be a bigger and bigger circle in the eyes of the two-dimensional beings, until finally at the equator of the sphere, it was huge. And then just as it appeared, it shrunk as it passed through the planet, becoming smaller and smaller circles, and then finally disappearing again as a dot. And a two-dimensional being, a two-dimensional planet, can't understand a three-dimensional sphere. We can dribble it. We can shoot baskets with a three-dimensional sphere. We live in 3 dimensions. A two-dimensional planet can't fathom a sphere, so they make up theories. And they say it was a circle that changed with time. They invoke the concept of time, as we do. How do we explain aging? Well, it's our body changing with time. How do we explain the seasons? Well, it's the earth changing with time. We use time also for things that we can't understand. And that's what the two-dimensional people did. They'll never understand a ball. They can't. And much of what we see around us, much of what we experience, is like that two-dimensional planet trying to picture a sphere. Maybe it's a 4th dimension that's happening to explain all those things that we can't understand. The hummingbirds, the viruses, humans. How do we explain natural disasters? How do we explain evil in the world? How do we explain Adolf Hitler? How do we explain things that are beyond our comprehension? How do we explain a pandemic? And the answer is, in my mind, and as I try to teach my kids, in a realm that we living in this 3-dimensional world can't ever understand. There are things that we will never understand. And that gives me great comfort, because it helps me not to try to understand everything. Understand what I can, but accept what I can't.
Right. Now, do you feel as though your soul grows, and do you feel as though your soul does know all these answers? It's just that when we are here on Earth, we forget them, and the purpose is so. Yeah,
I hope so, Deborah.
So that we can. I think we're here on Earth to experience the emotions, the feelings of everything, good, bad, and indifferent. Because if you buy into, heaven or the light,
sure,
everything is love. And I do believe that when we do go home, everything is love. It's that glorious feeling that fills you up when you do experience the hummingbird or some of the miracles that you've experienced. You have this feeling of wonder. But we can't be all in wonder here on Earth and experiencing, as you've said, Hitler, things of that sort, and still feel the light. I mean, you can, but it's, and then the spaghetti, I mean, it's a whole thing. But, yeah. So do you believe in synchronicities? Do you think everything's a coincidence?
I believe in coincidences, and I believe in synchronicities, and I believe in fate, and all of those things, including your beautiful description of our souls and the very nature of love. I believe all of that, but I believe all of that, our souls growing and greater knowledge that we'll acquire after we die, maybe greater knowledge that we had before we were born. I believe all of that is in a realm that we will never fully understand as human beings on Earth. That is beyond our comprehension. There's an epigraph, a little story that I start the book out with, and it's about two men sitting at a performance, at an outdoor opera. And the bright lights are shining on the performers. And in the bright lights, there are moths flying around. And one of the observers turns to the other and says, those moths are in a world that they will never understand, and they don't know that they're part of a play that they can't be aware of. Maybe we are in a play like that too. And I think that's right. I think that all of those feelings and uncertainties that you described, that I described, that we've both witnessed, that we can't explain, I believe all of those are like being two-dimensional beings trying to explain a sphere.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seacock Family Chiropractic in Seacock, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first grade teacher Caitlin Royd DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K-8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social-emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowdfunded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, the number 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
During a time when the veil between worlds is thinnest, join expert mediums to make contact with angels, departed loved ones, and your highest self. Guided by experts in mediumship, clairvoyance, and spirit guide communication, discover how to harness the wisdom from the other side. Mention discount code DREAM for 20% off when you register for the Wisdom Beyond the Veil at Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, October 29th to the 31st. Learn more at eomega.org.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Right. And you do, because I've experienced that sense of almost like being on the outside looking down on the earth. And I'm sure that everyone has felt that feeling. So you wonder, why am I feeling this way where I'm actually observing the world and my journey when really I'm here doing the journey? So there's all these little feelings, little views, little scenes, little movies we can experience that just gives us a little caption of the big answer, whatever that may be.
That's right. Let me tell you about synchronicity and coincidences for a second.
Yes.
After you asked that, so my second career has been as a collector of miracles. My first career was 40 years as an academic-based physician. My second career is collector of miracles. And I've collected a lot of medical miracles. And among those medical miracles that I've collected and published in a book called Miracles We Have Seen, which was really the predecessor to No Regrets Living, among those miracles were in medical miracles are a number of synchronicities. So let me share one with you. So Father Carl was a 75-year-old priest who was making visits to his parishioners on the top floor of a hospital. And he got into the elevator after finishing his visits and pushed the lobby to leave the hospital. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the hospital was poorly staffed. And instead of going to the lobby, this empty elevator went to the third floor. And when the doors opened to the third floor, Father Carl was lying without breathing on the floor of the elevator, blue and cold. He had suffered a heart attack in the journey from the top floor of the hospital to the third floor, but the elevator stopped at the third floor, not at the lobby where he had pressed. No one else in the elevator. On the third floor, waiting to go up, and therefore would not have caught this elevator, was the chief of cardiology, who had not yet left for the day, but was headed up to make rounds on his patients on the top floor. So as Father Carl, a heavy-set man, rolled through the door, unconscious and blue, the cardiologist who wrote this story, this is Dr. Dale Adler, who's a prominent cardiologist in Boston in the Harvard system, Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, wrote this story for the Miracles We Have Seen book. So he immediately started doing CPR and yelling for help from the elevator door. His ICU, cardiac care unit group, was on the third floor. The ICU was on the third floor. And the people there on a slow Saturday were just packing up to leave. It was middle of the afternoon, and there was no reason for them to stay any longer. But they heard Dr. Adler calling for help. They all ran, performed PCR. They shocked Father Carl, brought him into the cardiac care unit, where his heart rate came back, but he was unconscious. And they didn't know how much brain damage had occurred during this period of unconsciousness. But after a week, Father Carl had returned completely to normal, and after 2 weeks, he was preaching at his church. And he and the entire staff of the medical center came to hear him, where he expressed gratitude to God and gratitude to the medical staff, and said that the doctors told him that had his heart attack occurred anywhere else, in any other hospital or anywhere else in the hospital where it occurred, other than the elevator that stopped, for reasons unknown, on the cardiac care unit floor, he would have been a dead man. But he was standing in front of his parishioners, very much alive and very grateful for the miracle that saved him, the coincidence, the synchronicity that brought him back to life by stopping at the right place. And there are dozens of stories like that in the book of I mean, the simplistic way of saying it is being in the right place at the right time, but that's so simplistic because it is so much greater phenomenon than just being in the right place at the right time.
Right. I have a sense that we all have a time that we've actually been involved with choosing, and when it's our time, that's it. And if it isn't our time, all these synchronicities come together to save us. And then also, too, there's the potentiality that we can have another chance where we can extend our life instead of going, and it's all part of that mystery. But one of the things I wanted to ask you to share is your daughter, and with going to college back in the day and the synchronicity that happened there, because we have one too in our family. But I think it's so neat. So please share how that all came together.
Sure. It really is, for me, it's an evidence not only of synchronicity, it's evidence of fate. And it's evidence that God has backup plans to make sure that what is fated, what is meant to be, occurs. So our daughter had graduated college and was just starting graduate school in Washington, D.C. And my wife, Sarah, flew out with to help our daughter find a place to live. And there are literally thousands of apartment buildings in the D.C. area close to the university where she was going to do her graduate work. And they found a nice building, and they liked the apartment that they were shown, and they put down a deposit, and they walked out of the building and were happy that their search was over and they had found a place for her to live for the next 4 years. As they're walking down the street, they run into one of my wife's cousins. We live in Denver. The cousin lives in Washington, D.C., but they just ran into each other on the street. And the cousin said to Sarah and to our daughter, yeah, it's a nice building, but, it's a little there are too many strollers. You need something a little bit more singles-oriented, something a little edgier where young people go without families because you're not married and you're not seeing anybody yet, and you really should be in an edgier part of town. So they found another place, and they got the deposit back that they left at the first apartment building, and again, thousands of apartment buildings. And then my friend, my best friend from medical school, Harvey, called and said, his son's best friend lives in Washington. Do you think our daughter would be interested in meeting his son's best friend? And I said, I've gotten in trouble for trying this before, but let me check with her. And I checked with her, and she said, okay, all right, Dad. So we arranged for the two of them to meet. And the two of them met, and they fell in love, and they've now been married for almost 3.5 years. They've been married for 3.5 years. But the striking thing is that once they started getting to know each other, my daughter's date at the time, they weren't anything more than a date, showed her where he lived. And he lived in the very first apartment building, thousands of apartment buildings in Washington. He lived in the very first apartment building where they put a down payment and then took it back. And so that's God's plan B. If my medical school best friend had not called me, and therefore my daughter and her now husband had not met through my medical school best friend, they would have met in the gym of the apartment building, and they would not have taken back the deposit. And that was God's plan B. It was meant to happen. Of all the thousands of buildings, that was his building. So that's my daughter's story.
I love that. I love that. So I've never shared this on radio in all these years, but what happened on our end is, well, when my husband passed, I had to get a different job. And so I found this job of sales. It was actually in healthcare management and placing directors of nursing and financial people and clinical people, all of that. Well, my boss happened to have a 3-decker home in Rhode Island, and I have 3 daughters. And so the first one rented out the house, I think it was the first floor, whatever, and she stayed there during her college years. Come to find out, my other 2 daughters, when they were in college, rented at some time that same 3-decker house that my boss owned. Well, there was a large book, a genealogy book that my husband's mom, my mother-in-law, one of the cousins collected all this information. This was before Ancestry and all of that. And my daughters were reading it. We finally got it from my mother-in-law. And they were reading it, and come to find out, the house that they each rented in during their college years was built by their great-grandfather.
Oh, my goodness.
And isn't that amazing? All 3 of them. And my boss's wife was their 3rd cousin. They,
wow.
It's just my mother-in-law's.
Yeah.
It was all just connected. I can't even tell you the details of it, but we would just, how is that possible that I would just get a job, there would be this guy, and his wife was related to my kids, and the great-grandfather built the house. And so that's where they all lived back in the early day, and here my kids, and this is all happening, we found this out after the fact. So when you think of that, it's just beyond regular mind thoughts. It's just beyond.
I agree. Yeah, that is a terrific story of a house with karma. That house has karma.
Yes. So now I wanted to talk about your father because he survived the Holocaust, and I could feel how much you loved your father and missed him in the book. And so share about him and a bit of his story and wishing that he was here. And what would you, how do you think, because I think of this about my husband, what life would have been for the girls, because this was years back. So how do you feel when you think of your dad if he was still here?
Yeah, it's a very emotional subject for me, and as you said, I love my dad very much, and he died before he met my wife, and he died before he knew any of his grandchildren. After surviving the Holocaust, he died in his late 50s from pancreatic cancer. When I was in my early 30s and had not yet established my family, and I have great sadness about that. And his experience actually was one of the major influences for doing the No Regrets Living book, because I wish I knew more about him. I mean, we knew each other well. He knew a lot about me, but I was in the go-go years of establishing a medical career, the go-go years of residency and training, when my dad got sick and died. And, you always think you'll have forever to talk to the people you love, and you don't. And so part of the motivation for doing the No Regrets Living book was first to tell my kids a little bit about my dad, as much as I knew, and I wish I knew more, but also to tell my kids more about me, because I wish my dad had written a book about him and about himself and about what he believed and how he saw God after coming out of the concentration camps. He lost everyone. One aunt survived the concentration camps as well as my dad, but he lost his parents, he lost his siblings, he lost his cousins. He lost his aunts and uncles. Everyone was killed at Auschwitz or one of the other concentration camps. My dad was at Auschwitz, and he was strong enough to be able to be useful as a worker. His father was interned at Auschwitz with him, and as long as he was strong enough, he was kept alive. And then when he started failing, my dad tried to do the work for both of them, but finally the Nazis noticed, and they took my grandfather, who I never knew, my dad's dad, away to the gas chambers. So I never knew any of my family except one aunt and her descendants on my dad's side. And the goal of No Regrets Living is to teach my kids about my dad, teach my kids about me, but teach readers about the need to share their legacies and to urge readers of the book to develop a plan for sharing their legacies, because as you know from your husband and the times that he missed with your children, it's fleeting. And we don't have that many opportunities to preserve the legacies.
That's right. And if I think of my mother-in-law, Irene, who I love dearly, she had dementia, and all the things that we wanted to learn about her were lost. And then,
exactly.
You know, he couldn't share because he's not here either. So it's interesting how something can happen to one person and it affects so many others. But I'm with you, Dr. Harley, on that I think that the time is now to either journal or talk with the kids, the adult kids and the little kids, because I have 8. We've even talked about doing a little tour on the places that I've lived when I was younger, that kind of a thing, because
really sweet.
These are the things that you need to do now, not later when you don't have the memory to share.
That's exactly right. And Deborah, the memory it's a huge issue. I mean, we are increasingly seeing a population that is losing memory, and they're losing their physical memory, the memory that they store in their brain, but we're also losing the memories of those who came before us, because we don't ask the questions, we don't document the histories. You mentioned Ancestry.com before. In the old days, like 10 years ago, in the old days, there may have been a family archivist, someone who dug through old photo albums or old literature to track the family history. It is now so easy and so convenient to learn about family members that you otherwise would not know anything about. And I really encourage people to do that, to not just retain the memory of one generation or 2 generations before us, but I think about the 3rd generation before me, as my great-grandparents. I know incredibly little about them, incredibly little. But they had meaningful lives. They had hard lives. They had courageous lives, and I know very little about them. And I think for many people, 3 generations back is about the limit of what we know. And now the tools are available for us to learn more.
Yes, good point. Well, we're going to be taking a break in a couple of minutes. I have all these things I wanted to ask you. When we come back, I'd like to talk with you more on the infectious end of things and get your educated perspective on a couple of thoughts. And then we do have a couple minutes. So let me ask you, what do you feel that people can do to help the world heal? And could we ever cure the situation in having another, which we've seen quite a bit of it as of late, another Hitler? How do we prevent all that?
Yeah. Well, I think what we have to do is look at precedent. And we have to realize that some of the greatest threats to humanity, we have found a way to heal. We have healed so many incurable diseases. I mean, the last case of poliomyelitis in the United States was 1979. We have healed multiple medical maladies. We have healed many psychological maladies that we can now handle better. We have healed, in many ways, natural disasters. Earthquakes in the developed world are no longer nearly as devastating as they used to be because we build the buildings stronger, and we have better warning systems for hurricanes and for tornadoes and for tsunamis than we ever used to. They're not perfect, but they're a heck of a lot better. We have even cured man-made accidents. We build better cars. We build better airplanes. So there are many of the worst parts, worst threats to humanity we've had the experience to cure, and I put into that category curing evil. And I'll give you an example if we have time now. If not, I'll give you an example.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, so I want to go back to Whitwell, Tennessee in 1998. So Whitwell, Tennessee is a small town, a few thousand people. And the elementary school there was studying about the Holocaust. And the kids heard that there were 6 million Jewish people and another 5 million others innocents, who were murdered by the Nazis. And the teachers realized that the kids didn't have really a way of picturing 11 million people, what that means. So she told the kids about the Norwegians. And the Norwegians had a silent protest against the Nazis. They would wear a paperclip on their lapel. And so the kids and the teachers decided to collect 11 million paperclips and see what that looked like. And so they publicized the story. This was 1998. They publicized the story, and they received paperclips from President Bush. They received paperclips from the Pope. They received paperclips from celebrities and athletes across the world, ultimately accumulating 30 million paperclips. And they received donations from Germany of an authentic Nazi cattle car that had been used to transport victims to the concentration camps. They received artifacts from World War II and surrounded this cattle car with those artifacts to create a museum. This is Whitwell, Tennessee, population 2,000 or 3,000. Whitwell, Tennessee created a meaningful, memorable Holocaust museum, and into that cattle car they poured 30 million paperclips to show the outpouring of sympathy from around the world for the project that they had created. But what was striking was that the parents of these kids almost knew nothing about the Holocaust themselves. The kids taught them. The kids brought home their knowledge of the Holocaust to their parents. And I believe that all evil in the world starts in childhood, in families where kids are abused, kids are mistreated, kids are not appreciated. And if we can cure childhood from sadness, from despair, from illness, if we can cure childhood, I believe that we will cure evil. There is no Adolf Hitler ever created, no Pol Pot, no Stalin, who had a happy, normal childhood with loving parents. Those kinds of people don't come out of happy families. And I believe the cure for evil lies in protecting our children.
Yeah, I so agree. I love that story. And I so agree with you that it all starts with the child. If every child is loved and taught compassion and unity, and they're eager to learn, but because of things that we're on Earth, and because of things that have happened to the parents, and a lot of it is generational, that these kids they crave attention and they crave love, but they don't know how to receive it. They don't know how to speak up because, there's so many atrocious things that have happened by the human hand. But I so agree. It's the kids teaching. It's always been the kids teaching the parents, kids teaching others. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I feel as though it's the consumer when it comes to the food that is put in front of us these days with the glyphosates and all of that goes on, that if we don't speak up, if we can't speak up, we can through not buying different products, not buying from, larger corporations that are using their money in a hateful way, not in a unity way, in a place of love. With that said, we've got to take at least one break, Dr. Harley. Everyone stay with us. I never mentioned the number, but you all know it's 833-220-1200. We'll be back more in a minute.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Uncover how self-love can help you become happier and more confident with Lorna Byrne, best-selling author of memoir, Angels in My Hair. Gain understanding about your connection with your guardian angel and let go of the negativity in your life. Mention discount code DREAM for 20% off when you register for the Angelic Path to Self-Love at Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, October 22nd to the 24th. Learn more at eomega.org.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Are miracles real? Can you move from mayhem to miracles? 30 prominent authors say yes as they share their high fives and down lows of challenges, abuse, addiction, and love. Experience hope, the magic elixir of miracles, through the personal stories of New York Times bestselling authors James Redfield, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Sister Jenna, Reverend Temple Hayes, and many more. If you like bestsellers, chaos to clarity, and crappy to happy, you'll love crying and laughing through mayhem to miracles. Sacred stories of transformational hope. Available now on Amazon and in bookstores worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back. We're with Dr. Harley Rotbart. To learn more about him and to get the book, No Regrets Living, 7 Keys to a Life of Wonder and Contentment. And the 7 keys are believe, discover, heal, appreciate, accept, seek, and grow. It's HarleyRotbart.com, HarleyRotbart.com. Being an infectious doctor and a pediatrician and all of that, I wanted to ask, because I even wonder myself, I question everything as I've gotten older. But as far, and I should mention, in the book, after each chapter, there's vignettes of kind of like journaling about the pandemic as it went along. And I found that very fascinating, that you interweaved that with what was really happening with the pandemic as you were writing your precious book. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, I understand that there's there's a schedule of shots for the younger kids, and it's always been that way. It seems I did that thing back when the girls were little, and my girls are doing the same. However, what is your perspective from a clinical end of things, and from what you're feeling as well, about the having the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, for these younger kids when their bodies are already subjected to these schedule of vaccines? other vaccines, as you know.
Sure. So an important question, Deborah, and one for which the evidence and the scientific data are just now being presented. So none of us have had a chance to review what the efficacy of the vaccines are in kids yet. Those data have just been submitted by one of the vaccine manufacturers to the FDA, and they have not been made public yet. So I can't really comment yet on the efficacy of the vaccines, except to say that I'm sure that Pfizer, and subsequently I'm sure Moderna will do the same thing, I'm sure that Pfizer felt that the evidence for efficacy, for effectiveness of the vaccines in younger kids was strong. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone ahead with a submission to the Food and Drug Administration. But I have not personally reviewed that. I can speak to the question that you asked about vaccine overload, and that is, are we giving kids too many vaccines? And toward that end, I again go back to when's the last case of polio, measles, mumps, German measles, diphtheria, pertussis, or tetanus that anyone has seen. And yet all of those vaccines are being given routinely to kids. And does anyone miss polio? Does anyone miss diphtheria and tetanus, which used to ravage children? Does anyone miss those diseases? The vaccines are miraculous. They are among science's greatest contributions. And they have not shown, in fact, kids are healthier today than they've ever been, and that's in an era when all of those devastating diseases, and we can add to that influenza, we can add to that chickenpox, all of those diseases have been either eradicated completely, as the case with polio, or completely diminished across society. And if you look at developing countries where the vaccines are not as widely distributed, you still see severe cases of all of those diseases. And we are blessed to have the technology and to have the vaccines available. And to my knowledge, there is no evidence whatsoever that cumulative vaccines in children do harm. And again, I can't speak specifically to the COVID-19 vaccine in kids because the data haven't been released, but if precedent is any guide, kids will tolerate if the vaccine is shown to be effective. And if the FDA believes that, and if scientists around the country believe that the vaccine is effective for kids, I think we can be confident that adding it to the regimen, and it won't necessarily have to be given every year or every 3 months as some of the other vaccines are given, but during a pandemic, I think we can confidently say that it will not cumulatively add to any risks of vaccines. We still have to show that it's beneficial, and that those data are not yet available.
Right. And then I have to ask you this, too. What is your perspective on HPV? And then, because those are the teenagers, and then on top of it, they're getting the COVID vaccine.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that I don't like cervical cancer, and HPV vaccine prevents it. And if anybody would prefer putting their teenagers at risk for cervical cancer, then I understand that they might not want the HPV vaccine. But it is preventive of cervical cancer. And that is a remarkable, again, miraculous scientific achievement. And again, I do not believe, based on all precedent that we have, that there's any cumulative danger to having both the COVID-19 vaccine and the HPV vaccine given to teenagers.
Well, thank you for sharing, what you can. And
Sure.
There's just so much controversy out there.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of families with very sensitive kids where their systems are even having a hard time digesting foods and things of sort. So when you think of it from that perspective, you start to wonder, if you introduce this, if you introduce that, is it going to hinder the child from thriving? It's a hard thing. I honestly wouldn't want to be a parent of young kids right now. It's a hard decision.
I would never, just as I would not tell anyone what to believe in God, believe in the Big Bang, or what religion to believe, I also believe that this is a personal decision for families. And if an individual family is concerned about possible side effects of the vaccine or possible complications because of a family history of allergies or sensitivities to foods, that is a subject for discussion with their doctor. And I would not pretend to be able to know what's best for every individual family. I'm speaking as on the whole about what I believe is good for children as a pediatric infectious diseases doctor, what I believe is good for children. But every family is unique and every family has their own issues, and I do believe it's a decision for families to make.
Yes. So we only have like half a minute, and I had so much I wanted to share with you. But quickly, how has facing your own with the quadruple bypass heart surgery that you had, how has that changed your outlook and even thinking about your mortality?
Well, greatly, because not only did I have the bypass surgery, but I had what was feared to be a cardiac arrest, and the code team was called, and they brought the paddles right after the surgery. It turned out it wasn't. It was a mineral imbalance, but it was a scary time, and it again was one of the motivations, along with the desire to create a legacy for myself, for my father. It was one of the motivations for the book, and it colors everything, and the theme of personal vulnerability runs throughout the book.
Yes. Well, we look for more books coming from you, Dr. Harley, and I wanted to thank you so much for honoring our airwaves and coming on the show. I've really enjoyed this time with you.
Thank you, Deborah. I've enjoyed it too, and it's you are a wise and worldly questioner. It was nice to speak with you.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions all the time. But thank you, and we'll be in touch. And for everyone out there listening, share the show with your friends, your family. Listen to it over and over again, because you're going to reap some rewards, some nuggets that you didn't catch before as you face your own journey of evolution. So until the next time, au revoir.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week, all designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Beauvais, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one, and we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.